Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sharp Cuts. Garrett May alongside Josh Nickel. As always, today our guest, Jake McNeil. Welcome, Jake. Before we get into what I'm sure is going to be a highly intense and fiery conversation, as we always have, just a reminder to all our listeners out there, we are on YouTube now. Sharp Cuts Volleyball. Check us out on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces. Our YouTube watchers, they know. We're on there now. Hit that subscribe button. You can comment down below with your thoughts on some of the stuff we've talked about. It's a great way to connect with the listeners and just tell us your feedback. Are we way off? Probably. Are we saying things correctly? Probably not. So hit us up. Let us know. Anyways, with that, Josh, I'm not throwing it to you. I'm going to talk a lot to start the show because I came prepared today. And that is maybe a first or a second on this show. So, we've come out of the Olympics. Olympics are done. Canadians came fifth. And, I'm processing. We're dealing with the fifth place finishes, the losses. And, it got me thinking. And we chatted a little bit about this off camera last week about, what is the Canadian identity? And what does that look like for Canadians? And is it where it should be? And how does that impact our performance on the world tour? Because we've had some people reach out to us and say, hey, Canadians' identity, what even is it? Americans have their kind of, we're the best style. The Brazilians are tough and emotional, just across the board. So I was curious your guys' thoughts, and maybe we can get into on the Canadian identity and is it where it should be? Hey, don't all speak at once, all right?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in because when we did our quick meeting for this show, it was 2 seconds before this, and Jake made the joke grit, and you didn't laugh, Garrett, which reminds me you weren't there, but we actually hired a consultant once for the beach national team, and this is what we came up with as a philosophy, as a program. Like, we had to come up with this mission statement and words to define the program, and we came up with grit. And the hard part there, Garrett, is the project. Like, I get how other teams do it, and like the New England Patriots I'm a big fan of, and they had like the do your job thing. Like, team sports can buy in because they're all pulling in the same direction. The reason this grit thing never made it to you, Garrett, is I think with the beach team, the teams within teams, that people just don't buy into it, or if it doesn't get said enough, or if it's not like a cultural thing, it doesn't boil down to the day-to-day. That does a beach volleyball federation need an identity? Because there's so much going on.
Well, so like I'm confused though. Grit, like, get her done. Like, hey, we're up in Canada. Hey, got the grit. I'll set up a fence with the duct tape out in the back with the buys. Eh? Is that like grit? Like I'm confused. I definitely missed that. What the heck are we talking about here?
Gritty. Like, if anybody's a sports fan out there, just Google the Philadelphia Flyers mascot.
We're not. No, that's not the Canadian identity. Stop. We're not. That's not us. Or wait, that's not what they meant, right?
Jake, you can hop in here, but I remember we had a consultant. We tried to come up with this, and it never felt like it got off the ground. Maybe because we chose grit, Garrett. That's why it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I'll just start by saying, congratulations to those four incredible women. I think it was a very amazing showing by them. I'm sure they would have won more, but definitely congratulations to them. But
you know what? This is Sharp Cuts, Jake. You're being really nice off the start of the show, hopefully endearing yourself to the listeners out there, but not to me.
Lame.
Well, is what it is, Gare. Sorry, can't all please you, buddy.
It's very nice.
But I'll start by saying I think I don't absolutely hate the thing. I think it didn't really get described well, and I think it is an interesting aspect to like talk about defining a beach volleyball country when it's, really boils down to individual teams at the end of the day. But I do consider that, as Canadians, we always want to battle, right? We want to be out there and we want to be a team that's tough to put away, whether we're playing our A-plus game or we're not playing our A-plus game. We want to always be out there competing and battling. And I think that's somewhere that we kind of are, and we need to continue to build towards, is just being a tough out no matter what level we're playing at.
I'd agree that we always want to be out there battling, and for those of our listeners who aren't Canadian, I mean, it is kind of a Canadian thing to get in a scrap, throw a few chirps across the ice, drop your baki and gloves and meet out at center ice for a scrap there, bud. We like to be in the battle, but, other countries love to be in the battle, but they actually just win. Like, they go and just win the battle, and, we're maybe a little bit happy being in the battle. I'm not sure what Canadian grit means. Does that mean like, hey, we're tough, but we still lose?
We got the world champions from Canada.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
So I don't know if it's we always lose. I don't know if that's a good blanket statement when we have the current women's world champions. So I think that's a bit of a pop there. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, when I look at that team, though,
I think you're discrediting them a little bit there with the fact that, you know, yeah, they put together fifth, but I mean, they were playing unbelievable until that they ran into that Aussie team who played the match of their lives, and it was kind of a tough draw at that point, and kind of the toughest match of the tournament. And I was talking with your dad today, that quarterfinals is the toughest one to win. But I mean, you can't say all of a sudden that World Championship doesn't mean anything now. That's still a massive stage tournament that they were able to put their boots in and win 15-13 against the Olympic champions. So
yeah,
for sure, I don't think we can just discredit that.
No, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to, but when I look at that World Championship victory, and I watched it, we all watched it, we've seen a lot of volleyball. I don't look at that match, and I don't see. I actually kind of see the antithesis of what we've seen a lot of Canadian volleyball be in the past. I see something different, something unique compared to what we might consider the common Canadian theme. I didn't see a gritty win. I saw a talented win. I saw a team go out there and play well and be great, which is kind of different than what I certainly exuded as a player. I wasn't out there just being better than everybody else. So that's kind of what got me thinking is like, hey, man, we got such a diverse group of people, including indoors, sitting, everybody, that, what does that really look like for our country when there are other countries who are succeeding, who you can kind of say a few adjectives about them that are pretty common across all their teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that, and I think that's definitely a fair statement. I think it is hard, because I mean, as Canada, we're a very diverse country, though, so that is part of our identity. And I think, like you said, though, building those foundations for, this is what we expect when we get on the world tour is really important. So it's definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, so maybe for me, Garrett, just to give me some examples of what you're thinking, like, because to me, when you get down to it, Sponcil Clays are completely different than Alex and April, as are Carrie and Brooke. But you say, like, USA has an identity. Like, what's an example there? Or Agatha Duda, when you're playing them, are different than Anna Patricia and Rebecca, right? But you're saying those countries have an identity. So what was the example here? Because I think maybe I'm looking at this by team when you're saying, if you look at the federation, if you're playing anybody from Brazil, you're going to get this, right? Is that what you mean by the identity thing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like, it's the 4 or 5 adjectives that you would use to describe a team from that country that they would all, in some form or another, kind of embody. Like, for example, I would say that most of our Canadian athletes are polite, nice, sociable, like to connect and chat with people. I would say that's I'm using stereotypes for sure, but I think stereotypes come from somewhere. It's like, it's an evidence of trends, not necessarily what determines. Like, not all Canadians are like this, but a lot are, so that's why we think that. So like in other countries, and I'll use Brazil as an example, Brazil, I would say, in my experience, because I played a lot of Brazilian teams, they're fiery, explosive energy out on the court, show a ton of kind of emotion with their partners when they're out on the court. Those are just 3 common things that I've seen. I don't want to say all, but almost all of the Brazilian teams I've played against, seen play, kind of exude that. And I think that helps them win. Like, I think those are 3 things that you look at and you go, well, this is what makes their style a little bit unique and helps give them an edge, an advantage against other countries who, are trying to find their way, like us. No,
definitely. You do see it on tour too. I mean, the Germans, very technical, very driven towards that side of the game. It is an interesting thing. It's hard to kind of wrap our head around what that exact Canadian style is, for sure. So that is interesting.
Yeah, well, if it's a nice, gritty style, like we like to compete, we respect our opponents, but we're not necessarily the type who would, like, cheat to win, or like, because we're nice. We like to, like, that doesn't help us win in some ways. Like, in the way I look at it, and I look at our beach teams right now, the top teams, they're all very nice people. Like, all of them. I wouldn't say that any of them are, like, ruthless. I wouldn't describe them that way. You know what I mean? Like, I'd say, oh no, he's a nice guy. Oh no, she's a nice girl. Like,
you think? I mean, you saw that altercation between Pavin and the the Switzerland blocker, right? And the Olympics. You've watched Grant O'Gorman play enough times, right? You think that all of our players are that way? I don't know if I necessarily agree with you there, Garrett.
Well, I guess when I mean nice, what I mean is like when you go to the technical inquiry, Canadians are often smiling, like just the attitude you bring to that sort of thing. And yeah, I wouldn't say that they're lacking competitiveness. I wouldn't say we're lacking intensity. I would just say that we're certainly lacking a bit of edge to us. I would say that would be my impression, and I don't think that's where it needs to be. So maybe I'm a little bit off, but even Mel and Sarah, even our most successful team, Mel is one of the nicest people I know. She's sweet. Like she's happy. I wouldn't think of her as somebody who's going to go and step on somebody's neck or punch somebody out in a scrap, right? And I mean, she's a world champion, so maybe you don't need that, but I certainly think those types of things help.
Well, Gary, you were coached by somebody who was extremely focused. Like, I think a lot of this stuff, like, it might be in our nature, but some of it is a learned skill where, like, I'm sure if we were getting into it with Heath, like, there were times where he would big Sally and there was times there would be no Sally. Like, he was very calculated in those areas. So if we can't identify it and all we can get to is, like, we're all really nice people and really polite, like, maybe, like, is there one or two things that you would maybe instill in an athlete like you're working with that you think Canadians, like, this is a part of our culture, this is something we can execute? Because I think... yeah, it's really hard to think of a program identity right now. So if we could go the other way and reverse engineer this and say, well, if we had these traits, we would be further ahead, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, and this is just my opinion, I guess, I look to other sports that we are successful. When you think of Canadians and what we're successful at, what do you think?
Hockey.
It's the first thing a lot of people think. And, what's a prototypical Canadian hockey player, though? Not just in terms of their game style, but their attitude and their style of being out on the ice, right? I would say physical, tough, gritty, scrappy, fighter. Like, that's what just comes to my mind. Maybe that's wrong, but
yeah. But I mean, have you watched those guys do their interviews after the games and stuff? I mean, they're all pretty polite, pretty nice off the ice as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not the having nice is bad. It's that they have something else that seems to really make us successful en masse. And I think it's that little bit of craziness, a little bit of wildness, and the fact that our sport is a non-contact sport, that craziness doesn't ever play out in a physical way. You never have I mean, I guess you could, but you're never out there punching out your opponent or like getting in a physical scrap on the ice or actually bodying somebody out, because you got to be a little bit crazy to do that. And I think what I see in the Americans and U.S. to use them as the U.S. and the Brazilians to use them as example, Brazilians are so intense, like a little bit crazy intense, like aggressive mentality. The U.S., they know they're the best. They got this expectation that they're the best at everything, and that's a little bit almost unearned in some ways, but it just gives them that kind of edge in a scrap. And I don't see that translating over to our volleyball teams. I think it's that contact piece. Like, if we treated volleyball a little bit more like it was a contact sport, even though it's not, I think we'd see a little bit more of that, Canadian grit coming out, like you mentioned. I don't know how we do that, though. I'm just offering suggestions with no real concrete moves.
There's something to that grit or that work ethic, because when you brought up the hockey example, as a guy who listens to 2 or 3 hockey podcasts a week, like, Sidney Crosby's described as a blue collar superstar. Like, that guy works his tail off, but he is a superstar, right? So I think that work ethic that, like, Grant has, Heather has, even Jake has, like, there's so many Canadian beach volleyball players that we can say, like, they work hard, right? Like, it's Sarah, Mel, like, I think you list the top players in order, those are the hardest workers, right? So is that maybe too surface level, but I think there's got to be something with the work ethic. And then the hockey interview thing is a funny example too, where I think a lot of people flip the switch on and off. Like, Mark Heese is an extreme competitor, but he can, like, chill out and be cool and be funny at the beach. Like, he's not dialed in like you watch the Last Dance documentary, and Michael Jordan seemed like he was switched on all the time. Where it seems like volleyball players can switch it off and be jokey and funny, but when it's between the lines, like, it's go time, right?
Yeah. And how on is your on, right? Like, I think as a community, our on is pretty low, where compared to some of these other programs and teams. And I don't know where that comes from. Like, where does that? Is that just your country's culture, where you grew up? Like, I don't know where you get that. So maybe, Josh, you need to go out there and have guys actually fight at practice. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Well, I have a feeling, I can't confirm or deny this, but having watched the Latvians at a tournament, I feel like they fought before. Like it seems like they have some really tough conversations on the court. They don't pull any punches. The Russians don't seem to like each other that much.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
the Russians. Yeah,
but it's an interesting thing you're bringing up because I mean, you look at like Phil and Nick, and they're not that all that fiery either, right? So I mean, I think it can really be on a team to team basis. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think it's more about finding what works for each individual team and how that you can bring that out on the court in a successful way more than anything than saying each team has to play into this Canadian mold. Like it's like you're saying, like Mel's this happy, sweet, go lucky girl. So when she's out there on the court, when she's playing that way, she's playing her best. Where Sarah's a lot more intense, a lot more in your face, and she kind of brings that out on the court. So I don't know if it's necessarily we need this for the entire program. I mean, Josh talked about the hard work thing. I think that's a totally separate entity of like, of course, like if you want to be the best, we need to put in the ultimate work. I think that's definitely a fair point. And that totally makes sense. But I don't know, that's just me personally. But I mean, you see the Brazilians losing it on each other a lot, but you see Alisson smiling and giving the other team a thumbs up all the time. Like he's not looking to kill you through the net, right? He's calling his own touches for God's sake out there. Like, and that's an Olympic champion. So I don't know. It's an interesting topic for sure.
There's certainly layers to it because I agree with you completely. Phil's not a rah-rah guy, and I've never spoke to Phil, but when we had Todd on the show, they talked about they had this mindset that if we play our A-plus game, we're untouchable. Like they're not rah-rah guys, but Garrett, they had that American, like you said, like that confidence or that unwavering thing, which is like, if we're A+, there's nobody in the world who can touch us. And they don't need to broadcast that, but it's funny just hearing Todd say it on our show and on other interviews that like, we're untouchable if we deliver to what our standard is. Like,
and that's what I mean. I think it's about, if you're that guy that needs to rip the other team's face off, then you need to do that, right? But I think that there's lots of examples of people that have gone out, and I mean, I'm one of those guys that likes to get fiery, likes to mix it up, like on the court. But, I know some people that are the complete opposite, and that type of behavior doesn't help them, right? So I don't know. I don't know if it's like as much of a country by country thing, but I definitely know what you're saying, that those countries do have some identity. So I don't know. It's a really interesting take.
Well, I'll take it in a slightly different direction. And I think volleyball compared to other sports is a little bit younger, especially beach volleyball, right? Totally. It's only been in the Olympics since '96. So it doesn't have the history that some of these other sports do. When you look at a sport like basketball, for example, and in the NBA, which is kind of the marquee league around the world, you have so many diverse examples of how to get the job done and be great. You have all these champions who play in such a different way and have a different style that, you can't point like, oh, this team is like this or this play, because it's so diverse. But what you do have is the opportunity for up and comers to really have a series of examples of things that they can really pull from and add to their toolbox. Like, LeBron growing up, I'm sure, is watching Michael Jordan, taking things that he really likes about that, taking things from all these players, right, and adding it to their game. And the first place that happens in our sport is with your country. You watch your top teams at nationals, you watch them when they play locally, because we don't have the broadcast. So it's who do you see, where are they, who are you getting access to, who are your role models in the sport? And a lot of times it's domestically, right? And so, the country culture thing needs to be there if you also want to help develop the next generation. Like what are the things we're passing on to people who are watching us and playing? And if it's either not clear or not accessible, then we don't end up continuing this culture of winning. We got Mel and Sarah, the world champions, like, all right, well, let's get 3 or 4 teams in there. Like, let's get this going type thing. But if we don't capture that and kind of hold on to it tightly, I don't think we use it that well. Josh, I mean, like maybe we're breaking through some ground here for you and the boys there.
I think definitely, and it almost reminds me of that Damian Lillard quote where he talked about like his message was kind of like confidence is almost situational, and he had this funny quote. I just pulled it up for you guys. He was just talking about some guys with their national team are way different than they are in the league, right? So he goes, who we see every night sometimes in the NBA, they're completely different when they play for their countries. They got more freedom. Their comfort level is often it's obvious. Their confidence is sky high. So it's just funny that like you take a guy who's like maybe a role player with this team and all of a sudden he's the starter on France and all of a sudden he's big dog and Dame Lillard. He's doing all this stuff. It's like, I don't even recognize you, bro. But when I play you Tuesday night in the league, you're nobody. But now you feel like you're on my level. So it's just funny that I think the environment can maybe breed this. That's why I really think it is a skill that can be developed. It's just Jake's point is a valid one. It comes back to the team thing versus the culture sometimes. But I think there's still some big pieces that Team Canada could buy into that would be like this confidence thing, because I think USA Basketball, they have a certain attitude. Team Canada Hockey has a certain attitude that I think when you're a part of that, you walk in, and that's to me what culture is. What does the room feel like when you walk in? It's not putting grid on the wall or all these slogans. It's like, what do we do day to day? That's what culture is to me.
Did you actually put grid on the wall?
We didn't get that far. I think we were supposed to, but we didn't get that far.
Well, that's the mistake. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You got to put a picture of Gritty
and
Philadelphia Flyers Gritty up on the wall, right? With grit, Canadian grit. That'll get it done.
I think that Garrett's point is, I was just kind of thinking, and I was thinking about, some of my role models, growing up and kind of watching Garrett, watching Grant. But then as well as technology and streams are so readily available and stuff now as well, I think that you can take a lot from other countries as well now. I don't think that maybe, 20, 30 years ago, you weren't able to see, Brazil's. I mean, you can go on Facebook now and see Brazil's nationals and see these things. So, I mean, it's a very, I think looking at it, I'm like, I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think one thing that I know helped when I was playing is you do play those guys all the time from your country. So when they go out and are successful on the world tour, that does say something, because you're like, hey, I can play with that guy. I've beaten that guy at home, So if he's doing this on the world tour, why can't I? And I think that's where some of the other countries really build their stuff. But also getting to play your top teams also becomes an important aspect to your game, right? And that's kind of where the national tour and things you keep bringing it back to Brazil and USA, and they have the two best national tours on the planet. So I don't think that can be kind of snuffed off as not a thing. Their young guys are playing Bruno and Alisson all the time on their national tour, and I think that's so you're automatically learning. We get to, even on the national team, we get to practice against, Sam Schachter, Sam Pedlo. Ben and Grant are gone. Heather and Brandy are training in Brazil. Sarah and Mel are out training in LA. So I don't know if the girls are getting to really draw, or when can you name any times that our national team women have played Mel and Sarah?
No, Mel came to the beach this summer, and it was like people were starstruck because you don't interact with her that much. So people aren't thinking about beating Mel. It's like, is that Melissa at the beach in Mel's class actually talking to them? She's taking time, but they're not thinking about beating her.
We're not like, hey, when are you going to play those girls? So I think that national tour thing is a real thing. It's getting readily available watching other. I think you can watch other players. You can learn from other players. You can have other styles. I watched Bruno play hours and hours and hours and hours and hours from this 2016 to 2020. There's a lot of things in my game that are straight from him, right? But I think it's that, hey, I play against Grant O'Gorman. I had a good battle with him, Van Open, 15-13. Those are the kind of experiences that I think help you get onto the world tour and be like, this guy's in a 4-star main draw, and I'm hanging with him. I can do this. I think that's the part we're missing more than anything else.
I want to so badly disagree with both of you here, but that is such an excellent point, Jake. And I think kind of in tune with what I'm trying to say here as well is like, if you don't have that game that you're talking about, like Mel and Sarah don't come home and play our team 3, 4, 5 ever. It can never be close, and then that team can never go on the world tour and go, hey, we were close with this team. That should give us confidence to beat or be close with this team, because that is definitely a thing. Anytime you see our third team or a team not go on the world tour, we struggle. Almost 100% of the time, we struggle immediately because we don't have that. So, I did underestimate that, Jake. Good point.
Yeah, and I think just, there's something to be said about, hey, we kept it really close with them, or they kicked the absolute shit out of us, and, hey, we need to learn, how did that happen as well is a valuable lesson, right? It's like, okay, we're way off here. Because you can be training, you think you're working hard, something kind of being at the Olympics, I was like, looking around and just watching everything unfold, and you're like, well, I need to do that better. Just by being around excellence, you're like, those are some of the things I need to shore up in my own game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's a really big part that we're talking about that we're missing,
Okay, so lesson here, Josh, is you've got to mandate the top teams come back and play all the teams in a gauntlet style match. Just in it. Oh wait, isn't that why everybody wants to leave and hates the national program? Right, because they don't want to. Okay, don't want to be made to. Yeah, what a conundrum.
Hey, my clock started in January, okay? So, like, I'm going to call Ben Saxon. I'm going to call Grant O'Gorman. Don't say that nobody wants to be here. My clock just started, Garrett. My clock just
Yeah.
Hey,
so, but
that's
also,
a Canadian grit right there, Josh Nickel.
But I also think that, I'm sure Bruno and Ali Sam, when they're at the top of their game, aren't just going around Brazil playing those teams, right? Like, they have a $20,000, $30,000 tournament that they're coming back to play for. So it's meaningful for them, too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's just they're going to take the time out of their day to run the gauntlet of playing these teams that they think are maybe, they're at the end of the day, they're professionals and they have like livelihood and things to do as well. So I think it has to be worth it for them as well. Right?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. We actually don't have money to be paying these people to come back and play. So, I mean, the gauntlet mandate is really the only option that I see. So, I mean, Josh, that's really our only option, right?
Well, if we're not going to get sponsors, Garrett, we should maybe run like a Patreon program through this show, and we can get people to pay Sarah and Mel to come back, and then hammer down the gauntlet.
Absolutely. Okay. Speaking of Sarah Mel, kind of moving into our next topic, which is kind of related, which kind of had me a little bit fired up when I heard about it, and I'm curious if you guys agree with me or not. You probably do, but hopefully one of you doesn't, so we can get into it. Is this kind of culture shift, and maybe it's anecdotal, but seeing in Ontario, in Canada, with the emergence of the NCAA beach scene for young women, and kind of the emergence of beach volleyball just around the world, we're seeing a lot of young athletes decide early to commit to training full-time beach. Heard just recently about a couple of 16-year-old athletes who decided to forego playing club indoors, not going to play at university. They're just going to train beach full time. I mean, I guess they're seeing Sarah and Mel win the world championships and going, hey, this is a viable path in the sport for me. But kind of making that shift way early and kind of ignoring indoor completely, which, to share my opinion, I absolutely flippin' hate that. And I hate to see it. And it kind of bothers me to my core, because that's exactly the thing I went through when I was coming through. Is like, hey, are you going to commit to one or the other? Are you going to pick? And it's like, no, I'm going to go to university. I'm going to get my education. I'm going to compete indoors. I'm going to be the best player on my team to deal with that. And I'm going to kind of come out of it the better for it as an adult and be ready to hit the world. And so this switching to beach full time way early, like even before going to university, just bothers me so much. Josh, you probably love it though.
I think, I'll take the opposite side on this, Garrett. I think.
I mean, you'll take it. You love it. You're the next gen coach. You're trying to tell everybody to do this.
Well, I don't think it's going to benefit me directly, because I think the fastest avenue to success for this is on the female side, because like you said, the NCAA route to go play at school and be a full-time beach athlete, where I don't see that opportunity for males. And for you, Garrett, I totally agree. You would have given up competition opportunities. You would have given up like those stressful big game things. You would have been giving up a team environment to be like at that time by yourself at Beach Blast on a Sunday night, like training, like that's exhausting. That's athlete burnout. I don't think you're going to get better, versus you were playing indoor in big moments and getting better, where a female athlete, like you said, if they're going to focus on it from 16 and then go to hopefully a good school in the NCAA and play beach full time, maybe they're now going on the world tour and they're going to be really good, versus you look at the Europeans, we're kind of 4, 5, 6 years behind them at most times, because their athletes are playing national tour, CEVs, youth worlds, doing all that stuff, where I don't think it's a mystery that, like, us and the Americans are a little bit older at the Olympics than some of these other countries, right? And I think you can say beach volleyball is an older sport, but I think there's also a youth movement happening too, and it's a lot of these European countries with the athletes who have focused, like Mo and Sorm are not old dudes, and they're going to be back in the next cycle and the next cycle, right? So I think in Canada right now, it's a little bit easier for the women maybe to make that choice than the guys, just because, like I said, the competition route or the university or college route. Was Jake going to get fired up here?
My turn. I'm going to. I know it's not a popular take on this show, but I'm going to aggressively park pretty in the middle.
Come on, Jake.
No, and here's why. Here's the thing. I think kind of Josh kind of nailed it with on the women's side, still being able to go and pursue university and have those highlight moments. And, I just see, some of my some of the guys that I played against at Junior World Championships, and some of the guys that did commit to it very, very early and did move to full-time very, very early, and were in these tournaments and everything, and the kind of faster cycle of success that they had, and seeing that. I also was a high-level hockey player, played a lot of AAA hockey, was kind of in talks with OHL and stuff like that, and playing beach volleyball, playing high school sports, and I know the value of that as well, and just learning all the lessons from all the different sports that they can teach you, and learning how to be a high level athlete and going through the different movements and just becoming a more well-rounded athlete, and how important that is as well. So I don't know if there's a exact science to you need to commit to playing just one sport early. I mean, you look at it and you see, like, for instance, that girl that was a cyclist who's now an Olympic champion, went to the RBC grounds and was a varsity soccer player. So there's something to said, like, to being a good, solid, well-rounded athlete. But there is also people that are specializing in their craft early, Mole and Sorum, for example, that are excelling in their sport as well. So it's really interesting, because we do have things like athlete burnout is a real thing. And playing one sport 12 months of the year is never really good for you. Mentally, physically, can lead to earlier injuries and stuff. So I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm no scientist, so I don't pretend to know exactly how all those things work. But it's definitely interesting to see how both sides can be very effective, and both sides can be really passionate. So I don't really have a clear-cut answer.
What an aggressive park in the middle. What a cop-out.
I told you I was going to park in the middle.
Boo! Boo! Who brought this guy on the show?
I knew my stance, okay? And I think that it's important at an early age to play multiple sports and learn a bunch of things. But at some point, you do have to, I think, if you want to excel as an elite athlete, you do have to choose. I just don't know if it's as early as 16. You know?
Okay. Well, I'm going to take the counter on your argument about the cyclist, because I think that's an amazing story and that's awesome. But I can't see a varsity anything starting volleyball and being on the podium after 3 years, because no offense to cycling or rowing or those sports, you're just a physical athlete. But I don't see a lot of like ball skill stuff happening like in our sport, where a friend of the show, Alex Poldma, started doing CrossFit, and he beat a D1 rower in the rowing contest. And it's like, he's just a volleyball player with long arms, right? So I think there's certain things where if you're just a physically gifted athlete, you can make that change, where I don't see a volleyball player picking up a ball now and being on the podium in Paris.
All right. Rebuttals to both of you dumbasses with the weak takes, both of you. Where do I even begin? So who is Canada's best female beach volleyball player of all time?
Melissa Jimenez.
Oh, you're going to go Melissa.
I think Melissa's, if we're treating this like all the skills and we're doing everything, I think Melissa's better than Sarah. I think Sarah does her job extremely well. Sarah's extremely physically gifted. But as far as volleyball, I think Melissa's better at volleyball than Sarah is.
All right, well, I'm glad we went here then, because now we got argument number 2, because you're totally wrong, Josh. Are you effing kidding me, bud? Okay, assuming it's Sarah Pavin, because it is, and Josh's answer is completely
best
wrong.
Best defender, best setter, best server in the world.
Which it 100% is.
Keep going? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's at the Olympics with Heather, no problem. Melissa without Sarah, nowhere even close. I love you, Melissa, but, like, are we... Okay. Anyways, Sarah moves over from indoors, a full indoor career, moves over and dominates at the beach. I know another gold medalist at the Olympics who did that exact same thing. A pretty recent gold medalist at the Olympics, and Alex Kleinman. Full indoor career, makes the switch to beach, dominates. Right?
You're talking about
switcher.
Pretty physically gifted human being.
You're talking about unicorns here. Your anecdotal evidence is not evidence here.
Well, hey, we're talking about gold. If you want to be the gold medalist, right? Like, hey, if you're not trying to win, do whatever you want. Commit whenever you want. I don't care. You want to play? You don't want to play indoor? Don't play indoor. Like, I don't care. Like, if we're talking about you're trying to win the gold medal, right?
Wait, so you're saying that you think that Sarah Pavin would not be as good a beach player right now if she didn't play all those years of indoor?
100%.
Instead played all those years of
That
beach.
is my point. Because what she had to deal with as an indoor player, she's bringing to the beach, and it's made her game unique, strong, and she can really flex on the things that indoor really values. On the beach is a huge asset. Massive block, which she did a ton on the right side on national teams. Pounding C balls, back row balls, pounding from off the net. You got to be able to hit in beach volleyball. It hates me when people just try to cut and roll shot around 100% of the time. She's pounding, right? And I think her serve is probably not, I'd say the weakest part of her game. It's still a pretty good serve. And
Certainly
that's
not
something
as
in
good as
indoors you're
Melissa's.
taking a full rip as well. I rest my case.
You think Sarah's better at volleyball, though, than Melissa? I think Sarah's very good at 2 or 3 things that help with her physical gifts. I think as far as volleyball goes, Melissa's a better volleyball player.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're talking about who's got better skills. I don't really care.
We're trying to compare I think what you're trying to do is very difficult. You're trying to compare a goalie to a forward right now, and trying to compare blocker against defender.
Yeah, and we're going to keep trying to do it there, fence sitter.
Listen, no. But how, so what do you, you're basically into almost another argument because, Josh is saying she's a better passer, setter, maybe server. You're saying she's
maybe way better server.
You're saying she's a better attacker, blocker?
I'm saying that her contribution to the team, to the success of their team and her own success she's got the lion's share of that.
Wow.
Bold. I hope people are clicking on this because that's a bold clickbait statement.
That's a bold take.
I mean, I don't know. Well, then why would you say that Heather's not better than Melissa?
Wait, what?
Well,
I don't get the correlation there.
Heather's been to 2 Olympics. Heather's had tons of success. Sarah brought her to the Olympics.
But then, Heather then went to the Olympics again with Brandy.
Right,
What?
Yeah, I don't get the argument. I don't get the argument for Mel on that team. You're talking just skilled, she's a better setter, passes well, has better ball control.
I
Melissa's better statistically. I think she's won more tournaments. Whatever metric you want to use, I think Melissa's ahead of Heather. Other than Olympics.
No. That's fine.
And maybe by the end of their career, if Mel goes again and Heather doesn't, maybe they're the same. But as of right now, I don't think just because Heather's been to more Olympics makes her better than Mel.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to make that argument about Heather. I'm talking about Sarah.
Yeah, I don't know where your argument went there. I got very confused.
Yeah.
But
you got lost. Did you find your way back? I kind of got lost along the way there.
Yeah, well, it happens when you're on the fence. It's hard to find your sense of direction because you're not sure where the heck you are.
All right, so help me with the math here, guys. This will help the conversation. So Sarah is 34 according to BBB and started playing beach full time in 2013. So how old was she when she made the switch?
Well, 7 years, so she'd be 27, 28.
So you're saying that an indoor athlete can transfer after the age of 25 and be a world-class beach player, if they don't, I think her physical gifts shorten that path, but I don't think every athlete can make that decision where your first example of 16-year-olds going beach full-time, I think our sport is very situational and very skill-based, where I think the more time you have in it, you're going to go there, and as our sport grows in popularity, Jake brought up the hockey example, I don't think if you're playing AAA by 15, it's going to be really hard to make the NHL. And it might seem like the NHL is a long way away, but if you're not one of the best 15-year-olds, it's going to be really hard.
It's not. Yeah, it's
maybe
very
in women's volleyball, the line was a little bit shorter when Sarah started, but now with the NCAA's popularity, now with provincial teams and national teams, because Garrett, sometimes I think you were one of the first eras to have a beach provincial team in Ontario, and we're a beach leading province, right? So I think more opportunities have grown to maybe shorten that line, where I think Sarah's done a terrific job. I'm not just convinced that every year Volleyball Canada should be opening the door to 27-year-olds to try to make this switch.
All right, well, I'll transfer to my second argument then, because I think Jake's fence sitting hindered on the idea that volleyball and beach volleyball are so different that they're
No, my argument was a blocker and a defender is so different. If you want to argue who's the better side-out player,
blocker and defender are very different for sure, and it definitely matters what side you play, who's getting served, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
For sure. I'm just saying those are all factors that I think, where Josh is sitting behind her being the best defender, best passer, best setter argument. But Sarah's watching Sarah, her passing and setting is also pretty freaking phenomenal. So
yeah, we're not going to solve the argument of who's better between our world championship team. I don't think. I think that's a tough argument to really find a true answer at. But what I'm saying is, for for indoor and beach, they're not so different. That the skills you work on in your off season that you're playing indoor are going to translate to beach, and the beach are going to translate to indoor in a big way. Different than you would say, because you used the hockey example, Josh, about people focusing on hockey. If you're not the best 13-year-old, 15-year-old, whatever, you're not going to make it. Well, it's like, okay, well, sure, but in beach and indoor, if you're not the best beach player at 16, but you're a great indoor player, that doesn't eliminate you from either. You know, it's a later blooming sport for sure. And the skills are so transferable. And in my opinion, beach is heading in the direction of indoor in terms of the physicality required to really compete at a high level above the net. And that's stuff that indoor values. And you actually need to in indoor to get the job done. You need to be hitting at a high point. You need to be serving aggressively. You need to be handling balls at a high speed. And I think the more you can do that as a beach player, you're just going to put yourself forward. So this early movement, like you're just going to be digging roll shots for 5 years. You're going to get great at that when you're 21, but you haven't seen a full-paced woman or man unleashing their full weight of the ball behind it, because you only really get that indoors, right?
Well, I think an interesting argument though as well is how much the males, especially just because I coaching, watching male indoor volleyball, is a ton of hand passing. Come out to the beach, you're not allowed to hand pass. That's another thing. It's a lot of, yes, hard driven, a lot of tipping in indoor, a lot of do your own type of job, where on the beach volleyball game, you have to be a lot more well-rounded. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I do look out there and I see some indoor players that are very skilled, very well-rounded. Ign Gapith, for example, incredible ball control. You see him jump setting, you see him attacking, he's got great vision. Those type of players I think are going to have a lot easier time transferring over than somebody who, is a middle blocker that hasn't passed or set a ball in an X amount of time.
Well, you should tell Will Hoey, your partner, that he's in trouble, I guess.
But he's been playing beach volleyball, for...
Right! He's playing both! Because he's getting he's getting what he needs.
Well, I think if we're going to add more anecdotal evidence with the summer program this year, Garrett, we've had some guys who have not really played beach before. They're just really good indoor studs. And I agree with you. I think the beach purists say the game's so different. I think at a domestic level, the kid we got who was a really heck of an indoor player, like represented Team Canada indoor and then came to the beach around eight weeks, got really, really good and started to figure it out, where maybe at the international level, like how long did it take Sarah? Maybe 2 years, maybe Alex Kleiman, maybe 2 years. Alex Kleiman had early success and then kind of struggled and then got on it. So maybe it's a couple of years
at the World Tour level.
Yes. So it's not impossible, right? Like I think again, the beach purists are like, oh no, it's totally different games, Garrett. It's this or this. Like I think if you're a university player and you're thinking about beach and you're not really sure, if you commit a full season, a full summer even, you'll see improvement and you'll feel like you belong, I think.
Okay, so to get to the crux of the argument then, because we've diverged hugely, which is fine, but to get to the crux of the argument, where do you guys sit on that? Because I'm saying like, hey, play both as long as makes sense physically and logistically. Like if you have time, if you have the physical ability, you're not hurting and that sort of thing, to play both, play them as long as you can. So for some people that might mean finishing university. Some that might mean even going even longer. Some people play pro indoor and then play a few beach tournaments pro. Like there's a lot of different options there, but that would be my opinion. But would you guys be on the side of saying to recommend to a kid, hey, at 16 or 17, like, yeah, commit to one or the other?
I think it's tough in Canada, and again, to use the males, like if they committed to beach full time, they're gonna go 7-8 months without competition, which I think is an important thing about development. Like, who are they training with? Like, do they have a coach and a training group, or is it like Garrett and Mark at Beach Blast? Like, are you getting better by yourself versus are you getting coached up in an indoor environment? Did you just
toss out Garrett and Mark at Beach Blast as like it's not good? That's the pinnacle.
Well, I would actually like to hear more about your 18U year, because I think when you wanted to be a world champion, but you were still a heck of a club player, right? Where I think like the environment matters, where I think in Canada, you're giving up a lot to be a beach full-time player, especially on the dude side. Like, because I think competition, I think the facilities we're in the winter, as much as I love Downsview, it can be pretty draining sometimes on your energy. Yeah. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So for Garrett, when you designed that year, or your dad had a big input because he was your indoor coach, what was that year like? Because you did beach and indoor and it overlapped quite a bit, where sometimes I hear from indoor coaches, I don't want my players doing beach. It changes their approach. It changes this. It changes that, where it's like they're more the same than they are different. And I think you got to just manage the load properly about going back and forth, because you were probably training volleyball, 5, 6, 7 times a week at that point?
Yeah, we were doing Well, then you don't do indoor practice every day. You only have 2 indoor practices a week, potentially. Some teams have 3. We had 2. And I do 2 nights a week beach. I mean, it was 4 practices a week only that I got, right? I mean, you have tournaments and stuff like that, but it's not crazy to think about practicing 4 times a week, right? Like
No,
for an 18-year-old
as well.
For an 18-year-old club athlete, like, you know, if you only get 2 practices a week indoors, you definitely can be playing beach twice a week. It doesn't change shit. You'll be fine.
Totally. No, I fully agree with you there. I think that, like Josh said, on the men's side, committing to beach full time at that age is just not feasible. It's not possible.
So why is it different for women then? Why should it be different for women just because they can go NCAA? It's the same principle.
I think the turnaround is 4 years faster, though.
To what? Turn around to them playing on the World Tour?
But I think that for the club, they can be doing what you're talking about, where they have a system where they're playing.
These kids are quitting club to focus full-time beach.
Yeah, that's a tough. I mean, like you said, you could be playing twice a week. You could be playing twice a week indoor, twice a week beach, and then still getting those competitions on the weekend, because those girls that are quitting are not getting the competition that they need, right? Until I think we have a solid competition-based winter for these athletes, which I mean is hard in an indoor facility for sure, because it's not the same. I got to side with Garrett here and say that they can definitely be doing more, because the indoor demands that we have at HNU are just not that high. Once you start playing indoor university, as you know, Garrett, it's 5 days a week. It's 2 matches on the weekend. It's a totally different load that I think that kids aren't ready for at all, to jump from their HNU to university careers. That's a different argument though, but I think that there's room to be doing both throughout for sure.
For sure. And I think it takes the coaches to allow the athlete, to be athlete-centered and let them do both, because I'm telling you right now, there's indoor coaches who won't allow their athletes to do that. But the reason I think the lineup is quicker for the women with the NCAA is you're trying to earn a scholarship, and spots are limited. Like, they have the 5 dual teams, and they're not fully funded programs. They don't have a scholarship for everybody. So you're competing with the Californias especially, but I think Texas beach volleyball's popping off, Arizona. You're playing against athletes who are training full-time year-round. So I think if you're getting the specific beach stuff, there's enough there that you're training against full-time athletes trying to fight for the same scholarship. That would be maybe why I think the line's a little bit shorter for the women to commit to beach early. But I agree with you, Garrett. I think you're still getting a lot by the indoor experience, that to just turn your back on it and say, I'm beach full-time. I don't know if that helps you pass these California athletes or anyone else. I'm not sure. Now I'm fence sitting.
Now, when you're talking about the California athletes as well, right? They're training outside the whole entire year, and there's tournaments all throughout the year for those younger girls as well. So committing to full-time beach in California is a lot different than committing to full-time beach in Canada.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
So I'm on the point, and I'm going to go even one step further. I think even them shouldn't be committing to one over the other. I think playing indoor is that beneficial to your beach game, especially for the women, where we seem to, especially in Canada, on our teams who aren't at the top, lost the art of pounding it hard, hitting a hard hit. Whereas indoor, you have that. Wait, you're not roll shotting to win champ. You got to hit the frickin' ball. And we seem to lose that when we go to the beach. Oh, yeah, we'll just hit a bunch of roll shots because we have more space. Absolutely. Hit roll shots. Do it. But at the highest level, people are feasting. You see them pounding on 2. You see them getting the high ball, hitting around a single block. If you're hitting around a double block indoor, you go to the beach, it's I'm just pounding away. Build that expectation by playing indoor is, I think, way too beneficial to ignore it in your early part of your career, especially when you're not ready to play on the World Tour. You're not an adult yet to go and play on the World Tour, 21, 22. You're not. If you're ready, great. Go do it. Commit fully. Make your money. But if you're not quite ready, let's get some action going. Let's get some competition. Let's get some indoor going.
Well, I agree with you, Garrett. As a guy who loves stats, one of our KPIs is the men's numbers increase. That over 60% of the time, it's a hard-driven ball now on the men's. If you divide it into roll shots, pokies or tips, and hard-driven, it's over 60% of the time the top 15 teams in the world are hitting the ball. At least on the guys' side. I haven't looked at the women, but since we're using anecdotal evidence, I'll just throw this wrench in here, because apparently I'm on the other side of you. What would you say to the Russia model, where they identified Stoyanovsky as a unicorn, and they said, beach full-time, you're going to CEVs, you're going to Youth Worlds. Even when you're 17, you're going to play U21 Youth Worlds. We're going to strap a rocket to you. You're going to go to everything. And guess what? They got a 24-year-old who was a world champion, and they got a silver medal at the Olympics. So they went front of the line, strap a rocket to you, you're beach full time, let's get this guy going. And I think there's something to say for that model sometimes too, right?
Mullins-Oram, same model. Playing CEVs in World Tour F15.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't argue with results. I mean, they're winners. I mean, they won. They've done some great stuff. So it's hard to argue with that. But, I mean, I would say, well, then why the hell aren't we doing that with our unicorns?
Well, why didn't you won Youth Worlds before you went to university, and then you went and played indoor with the Mustangs? Why didn't you just go beach full time?
I'm not a unicorn. I wasn't a unicorn. That's the thing, right? I'm not Stoyanovsky. I'm not 6'10" or whatever, lurk guy way up there. Like, I'm 6'3" guy trying to make my way. Like, I had to go to indoor because I had to become a man. I had to grow up.
So we're bringing back tall maples, and we're not letting them play indoor. You would lose your mind, Garrett, if we did that right now.
Well, hey, not if it works.
So give me 8 years then, I guess. Give me 8.
Hey, I'd give you 8 years, Josh. I mean, hey.
You're a good friend, Garrett.
Let's go. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, though, because I'm saying, like, that my argument is those guys I wouldn't say they'd be better. Like, they're winners, like, but they would still have benefited from playing indoor. And I'll throw out a suggestion here, because the model in Canada has often been, and when you're in high school, you play club from September to May, which is a lot of the year, and then you play beach for much less of the year, and that's because of weather here, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine somebody graduates from university, though, and who's maybe a later bloomer, a physical athlete. Why wouldn't they play beach from those same months? 8 months, play beach, and then have a 2 to 3 month indoor season? Doing some, I don't know. We don't have that available even, because nobody does that, right? Like, what if they play in the one volleyball league in the
old reverse?
Yeah, like flip that. Like we do it in club for indoor. Why wouldn't we flip that for somebody who's maybe a bit more beach focused, but give them some indoor push?
Because I think in the grand picture of things, I think indoor drives us here in Canada because the numbers are ridiculous. Like, I don't know what the actual ratio is, but it's got to be hundreds to one about the amount of kids playing indoor versus the amount of kids playing beach, right? And then it'd be a tough sell based on our infrastructure. But I think you're onto something where I think people can take beach more seriously. But I think the compliment is there. Garrett, you sold me. Garrett. I think in Canada you can play both.
Yes, we did it. Jake's still sitting on the fence. Okay.
What?
I did what Logan did to me. We were 1-1 and Jake was in the middle. Now I've hopped over here. Jake's on one side.
Yeah, absolutely. We gang up on Jake and we win. We win this argument. No.
Remember agreeing with Garrett at the start.
Yes. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Okay. I have one more topic that I wanted to get to that's kind of related as well. Because recently, Josh, you had to do something. You had to do something that I hate, that we all hate, but you had to do it. You had to pick teams, or at least be a part of a group, to pick teams to send to our Junior World Championships, and without having a tryout, without seeing any of them.
Without even watching them play.
Like, what are you looking for? How do you do that? I get with COVID, you have to do that, right? My choice would be don't do that. Don't do it. Have a tournament, figure it out. But you had to do that, and I'm with you. You definitely had to do that. So what do you look for? Like, what the heck's going on? Are you even allowed to talk about it? Because Jake and I could just go back and forth about what we're looking for. But I'm curious to hear from the horse's mouth.
Well, no, you guys can hop in at any time. I think even in the press release, our high performance director, Ed Dragic, said we would run a tournament if we could, but this is the only alternative. And when you get an email from the FIV that says if you don't have your team submitted by X date, you're not going. And we go, whoa, okay. Like,
no, you got it. You have to just pick them. I'm with you 100% there.
So, and the original idea was somebody had said around the table, well, let's just nominate. And I go, whoa. Like, I'm not just going to nominate and pick this team. Let's do an application. Let's do video. Let's do some stuff. So, I mean, it wasn't a perfect system, but yeah, I wasn't comfortable, Garrett. I'll be honest with you. And there was a quote from one of the podcasts I listened to that kind of made me feel a little bit better about this. And it was like, if you're a leader and you don't like problems, well, then leadership isn't for you. So I understood that there was going to be some problems. And I think the level in Canada is good enough that no matter who we chose, there's going to be a couple teams in every division who goes, hey, why not us? Like, it was not an easy decision, but we had a committee, we had a grading system, everybody did their scores independently, and then we sat around a table and we said, oh, this is this, like you share your scores, and we kind of had a group discussion that way. But I mean, there's no there's no clean way to do it. I reached out to some indoor coaches that went through the same process. And I mean, I don't think anyone enjoys this, Garrett, because like you said, the tournament's so evaluation friendly. You win, you go, and you do this. Where now you're watching video, and you have to be aware of everybody's situation, because some people are submitting video from 2019 because that's the last time they competed, and maybe in their province they can't go play a 2-on-2 game because of the rules at the time. So I'm not going to stand here and pound my chest and say, well, this was perfect. We did it our way. It's like we were dealt a bad hand and a deadline, and we came up with a creative solution, and we did the best we could with that creative solution. Where I think the right decision was made, but it was not a comfortable process being an evaluator in that situation, I'll be honest.
Well, Jake and I appreciate your vulnerability, and I'm sure our listeners do as well, because we were not assuming that you were going to say and pound your chest about how great a system it was. We knew it was a shitty situation. So I'm curious, though, and I'm not sure if you're able to talk about it, because I know it's kind of behind the scenes and kind of proprietary information, but I'm curious, like, what were some of your biggest challenges in having to deal with that? Because, I mean, you got to account for context for all these athletes, but you've also kind of got to, like, sift through that. You got age. Like, is age a factor? Like, what are some of these things that you're struggling with dealing with when you're in the room with everybody?
Well, age is definitely a factor, because it's a U19 and a U21 year. And then I wasn't comfortable with the idea of putting two athletes together. So I know, Garrett, you played 1 year with Nick, where traditionally the tournament system is you sign up with your buddy, where I didn't want to say athlete ABC should go with athlete XYZ and spend your own money to go to Thailand, even though you've never met each other. And I hope you do really well, where, like, sign up with a partner. I think the hardest thing was really boiling down the context of the video. And what I mean by that is, like, just like our discussion about who's better, Melissa or Sarah, well, they might need each other, but you got to have a way, like, which partner's stronger, what's the competition like across the net, like what are we doing here?
That's the stuff. And was it like full match? Like, I'm assuming you're watching full matches, because I mean a highlight tape is, not. I've seen some
for sure. Highlight tape,
gnarly highlight tapes on people, and it's like, whoa, you lost that match by 14, and
but you had a few great bounces.
Yeah, like, you looked phenomenal in the 14 points you won, but you transy set 3 over the net.
Yeah, and then you folded it. It was 14-all. You look great. Then you lost 21-14. Sorry.
That's right. And I think that must be, like, it must have been hard to. Yeah, I'm sorry, but before you answer, like, it must have been hard to be like, how do these athletes deal with pressure? How will these athletes deal? Because that's kind of something the tournament always brings out. And, as a person that, definitely wouldn't be sitting here without those tournaments and having to earn your own way and win those things. I was never really chosen for anything, or told by the national team coach at the time that there was just no way it was possible for me. So I'm very interested to, hear how this all went down, for sure.
Well, I think looking back, you got to have your criteria spot on. So we asked for, because we predicted a lot of applications, we asked for 2 sets from 2 different matches. So we couldn't watch 2 full matches on everybody, but we asked for 2 sets, and we wanted it from a different match. So at least, again, you could snoop through the context of it versus like, oh, we slapped this team and we're going to do this. And the other thing is, well, no highlight tapes, because as Ian Evatt told me on Passin Dimes when he's doing recruiting for McMaster, he's never seen a bad highlight tape, right? Where you want to see the full match. You want to see what they do after a bad mistake, after what their teammate does well, their teammate does poor. Like, you want to look for those situations, right? So we asked for a full set from 2 different matches, and that's kind of how we tried to, like, filter through this. But yeah, it was not easy. And then how do you compare? I don't want to single it out, but how do you compare an athlete playing in their province in their high school twos league versus somebody who played somebody at, like, a FISU qualifier for the understanding the level was really, really hard, understanding their experience, trying to identify, like, international potential about, like, okay, they're this now, but what are they going to be? Because Garrett and Jake, I think one of the biggest problems we have is a lot of other federations use Youth World as, like, a pathway to the national team, where we've had a ton of mighty mites who are really good at U19 and can ball out and win the tournament, and I don't think I've seen half them since, right? So you kind of got to be aware of, like,
are you taking a shot at somebody in particular there, Josh? Because mighty mites, I couldn't help but feel a little bit attacked here.
You're the tallest guy in the show, Garrett. You're the tallest.
I was gonna say at 6'3", yeah, you're preaching to the wrong choir.
Oh, you meant like short dudes.
Yeah,
like the 5'9" male who can ball out and win a U19 trial, but then doesn't play internationally for Canada. Like, their career has peaked, right? Which is, I mean, it's going to happen. If you're the best U19, you should probably go, but, like, that doesn't filter into the national team sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't envy that position. Like, what if somebody did this, just played a practice match, and, like, had the other team like, hey, let me look good. You know, like
Yeah, guys are good at editing too now.
Yeah, like tell them the symbols, like so I can make it look like I've identified this cross block and pounded line, but I knew the whole time type thing.
Set super tight and just, you know, hit as hard as you can into my partner's mitts. Like, yeah, no, that's.
Call your shots before you hit them. I'm going to chase it down 100% of the time. I'm going to look great. That's what I would have done.
Added out the video. Yeah, Garrett getting into the tech savvy stuff.
Oh, yeah, I would have been right in on that.
Yeah.
I would have had the score overlaid up there and just like boosted it a few times for myself as well.
I hope it didn't happen. These are all great ideas. I hope they didn't happen, but I'm not.
And another thing that I'm curious on is like how much does it impact, like, obviously you're trying to take bias out, but if you've heard about these guys or seen, hello?
Yeah.
If you heard about those guys or seen them kind of play before, how much of a factor was that? like?
Yeah, I'm going to say I wasn't in that position. I think that's why I wanted the application thing, because if we did nominations for U19, for U19 women, I don't know the players, and that's not my portfolio. I don't go to the OVA and I don't watch, so I wasn't in that position. But I think for other athletes, yeah, you have a certain idea or a certain name pops up, or you've heard about so and so, or this player is also on the indoor national team. So it's like, do we try to steal them back? Like, I think that stuff that comes up, and I think that's why, again, like I said, you got to have your criteria at the start really laid out, that this is what we're grading on, versus like, oh, did you see Garrett May applied? Oh, he has to go. I don't care who he's playing with. Like, we've heard so many good things about this guy, right?
Yeah,
like,
well, no, that's a given though, right? I got picked twice to go. Of the 6 I went to, I was just selected twice.
You went to 6 Youth Worlds?
Yeah.
Ooh.
2-2 and then 1-1. So I went
Jake,
I went to 3.
Yeah, I went to 6.
But earned it every way.
Earned it every time. Yep.
No, I did not earn it every time. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So they had a selection tournament one year, but we were getting 3 teams for Halifax, right? Because we were hosting, so we were getting 3 squads. So I entered the tournament with Greg Simone. Shout out Greg if you're listening. You're probably not, but he was not one of the top guys. But we balled out, like we were competitive as hell, and we were like giving it, and I was giving it everything I had, because I was like, man, I had no partner. Nobody wanted to play with me, like nothing. And then after the tournament, Leonard, who was, I guess, picking at the time, was like, Garrett, I really appreciate that you gave it your all and really helped out Greg. I mean, Greg really improved. Like, thank you very much. You're still going. And I was like, amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Leonard. I mean, I'd won the tournament 2 years before, so I was like, I mean, I better be going. Like, are you kidding me? But yeah, they just picked, right? Because when you got a bunch of teams, you just pick them.
So you couldn't get a partner after you had won world champs.
I know. Well, of the age, right? I mean, anyway, and actually, the year I won, we didn't have a selection tournament either. It just kind of put the teams together. So Sam was going to go with Dan, and I was not even going to go maybe. And then Dan got injured, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's make this happen. And then you go. That's it. No tournament, nothing.
See, I wasn't around enough in that area to know the conversations or to understand, like, was VC getting heat for this, or was it just the way it is, like the coach selection? Because I imagine when it goes public and our teams are announced, I'm going to get some angry emails. Like, I just, somebody's going to be let down, where it sounds like in your era, Garrett, it just sounds like Leonard made a decision and everybody was okay with it. Or maybe he took some arrows in the backgroround. I have no idea.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure there was a lot of heat. I mean, I was okay with it because I was the one getting picked, but I'm sure they got some heat for that, especially in the years that they didn't have a tournament, or the tournament order didn't determine all the teams. Like, we had a year where the tournament, if you won, you got to go, but then there was 2 teams because we hosted twice in a row. So, like, you know, they already had one team determined, and then they picked another, but then they could pick 2 teams. Like, it was kind of weird, right? So I know that those conversations are super challenging, and I know the criteria that you use. I'm curious, like, were there any on there that you were thinking, nah, this is tough? Like is age a factor? Like, do you have past results? Like, does that stuff play a factor?
They did list the results. To be honest, it was so hard to weigh because of COVID, right? So like one of the indoor coaches, I won't say him by name, but he said, "Why wouldn't you just send whoever won nationals?" And I was like, "But if we did that for U21, you're looking at who won 18U nationals 2 years ago, and you're trying to negotiate and say they are the rightful owner of the U21 spot. Like so much has changed." Physically, mentally, are they even playing with the same partner? Do they even play beach volleyball?
And if you're good at that age, you don't play your age nationals. You play adult.
And I'll choose my words carefully here because I'm a big believer in nationals. I've ran it a few years when I was at the OVA. I'm a Volleyball Canada staff person right now, but I think with our country's geography, I'm not sure nationals every year is all the best teams because I witnessed it when we're in Ontario. It's a heavy Ontario event, and then when it was in BC, thankfully, like guys like Jake and A. Rich and those guys went out there, but we didn't reciprocate. All the Ontario teams who had played nationals the year before didn't go to BC nationals, so there's no perfect place to host it that it's like this inclusive thing. And if you win U21 nationals, you are the best U21 team in the country because you can always be negative Nancy and say, oh, this team wasn't here, this team wasn't here. Like it doesn't always fit, right?
Winnipeg. We're going to hold the tournament in Winnipeg, the center, the armpit of Canada. And it'll solve all our problems.
There you go.
Well, I think actually the lesson from today's episode, guys, and yeah, we reached the end time, is that I managed to convince Josh to take my side on an issue. I mean, I think that's got to be an epic victory for fans out there of me. And I appreciate you. Jake, thanks for coming on, man. I mean, you always got some intellectual things to say. You're raising the IQ, I think, of the arguments, which we're not really used to. So it threw me off when you're trying to bring logic and reason to these arguments. Josh is trying to use numbers, it's not working, right? So, I mean, well done. Thanks for coming on. Anything else you want to say to the folks at home who are still listening? We know Josh Binstock is still listening, so thanks, Josh, for listening. He was our guest last week. Jake, anything you want to shout out?
Nope. Just I think no matter what it is, indoor, beach, whatever, get out and play, especially in these times. You know, I feel bad for the kids that kind of got short-sighted in their club, and just get out and play, and let's get the sport growing out here in Canada, and let's get that national tour going.
All right, Josh, anything you got to say?
Well, I'm just going to build on your point to Jake, to know your audience, right? I'm trying to use facts and figures and stuff, but Garrett doesn't care anything about that. But the emotional argument, the intellect. He knew his audience, and that's why he won today's episode. He was the best today. So thanks for coming on, Jake. Garrett, come on.
Yes, Guy. We knew it. Thank you, Josh. Wow, this is like, you guys, we're all so nice after we just argued for an hour. I mean, hey, well done. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Again, we're on YouTube, Sharp Cuts Volleyball. Josh, have you subscribed to our own channel yet, buddy?
I don't know if I'm going to do that right now.
Are you kidding me? No.
I did like.
Let's go, bud.
Comment.
You gotta smash that like button and subscribe.
Friend of the show, Lisa Tam, commented first, and I laughed and I clicked like on it because Lisa's been commenting on.
You liked the comment, but you didn't subscribe to your own channel.
Yeah, where's the button, Garrett?
That big red one, bro.
Oh my goodness!
It's that big red button.
Jake, you better go subscribe right now and comment down below and say second or something. I don't know.
Garrett, do you subscribe to the audio versions? Like, are you part of my downloads for the audio?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah, I 5-starred it too, as you all should if you're still listening. Thank you so much for joining us. I think that'll do it. We'll see you all next time.